Our next guest is a doctor who's been out to Gaza, not once, but twice since the genocide began.
It was horrific. Children ages 6 to 7 with their abdomen torn apart with shrapnel.
Everyone believes doctors on everything else.
Many of my colleagues did not believe us.
I've never understood why it isn't a scandal for a doctor to make any kind of excuse for this.
And they did not accept the fact that all these atrocities are going on in plain sight.
We're very delighted, and I heard him speak last year and it moved me a great deal. And then, so when the Toronto event was happening, I said, Naomi and I are going to talk, but let's have a guest. And there was an obvious person we wanted as a guest, because some of us sit here and talk about what's going on. I do that for a living, I run my mouth. Some people actually go risk their lives and go put their bodies in the middle of a conflict. And our next guest is a doctor who's been out to Gaza, not once, but twice since the genocide began, has come back and told a story of what he's seen out there. He's an ophthalmologist, he's a plastic surgeon, he's really a hero. Give it up for Dr. Yasser Khan. Thanks so much. People are standing for you, and rightly so. Let's all stand.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we are going to I hope you heard that last question because we were talking about it backstage. We'll get there. But first, there's clearly a lot of people who've heard your stories, your harrowing stories coming back. But for those who haven't, you talked about the first time you went to Gaza, making your peace with God because it was so dangerous to actually go. So can you describe just those first few hours and some of what you saw and what it was like when you first went?
Yeah, I went, my first mission, I was on the first mission to Gaza from North America, I think, and you know, I didn't know what to expect before I was going in. We all had been watching this for 3-4 months at that point in time. And so I went in, and you described, you know, how I made my peace with God. It was that trip I took from the Gaza border, which was still there at the Rafah border. Now it's been destroyed. It was a 20-minute ride at night when the Israeli army was bombing any vehicle that was moving with their drones. And so it was a 20-minute ride. It was dark. There was nobody there. The lights were off. And at that point in time, we could have been hit at any point in time. So that's when I made my peace with God and my family, and I was ready to go if need be. But we arrived at the hospital, and there was bombs going around us because at that point in time, there were about 500 meters to a kilometer around the perimeter of the European Gaza hospital where I was in Khan Yunis at the time. And you could hear the bombs going. And they would say that give it about half an hour and the mass casualties would come in. And the mass casualties did come in. And I'd never, you know, I've been to 40 different countries. I've done a lot of humanitarian work, but I've never been in an active war zone. And that's when the casualties came in. And that's when you saw mostly children, ages 6 to 7, with their abdomen torn apart with shrapnel. There's a 9-year-old girl that I remember with her leg was just dangling with her skin because the bone was gone, and her eyeball was shattered with shrapnel. You saw mostly children, you know, women. I didn't see a single quote-unquote combatant at all. It was mostly children, women, and it was elementary age children. That is what I saw mostly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you have children yourself. The obvious question I have to ask you is, when you're out there, and a friend of mine where I live in Washington, D.C. also went out, Irfan Galaria went out there as a doctor as well. Same question I ask him. When you're out there and you're seeing kids in this level, I don't know who you treat in Toronto, but I'm assuming you said it's your first war zone. What is that like? You're not trained for this. You didn't go to medical school to be trained to deal with kids being shot in the face or legs or whatever it is. How do you adapt to that? How did you adapt to it? Liking this video? Then don't just watch, hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to Zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Yes, I mean, it was horrific, the most horrific things that I've ever seen. And, you know, as a surgeon, you know, you just go and just do it. Right? And you worry about the emotional impact of it after, because you can't at that point in time. Yes, you're shocked. Yes, you see eyeballs and faces. I mean, I saw you know, 8-year-old children with pieces of their cheek missing. You could see the skull or the facial skeleton underneath. And how do you fix that? So we had to operate sometimes without anesthetic. Sometimes on sewage filled, they would clean it up because you know, the hospital at that point in time had about 25,000 people seeking refuge. The sewage system had overexploded. You would clean the sewage off and then do something on the floor. There was no anesthetics often. Pain control afterwards was not there, and you had to operate in that scenario. And many of these kids lost their entire families, so that they would wake up to find out that their entire families are gone, and so they're alone. And you have to deal with that. I must hand it to the Palestinian doctors and nurses who helped us. I mean, they are the real heroes, 100%. People of dignity, community, just beautiful people that really, you know, really consoled me and inspired me to go ahead and do what I had to do.
You also take on the burden of storytelling. I mean, the work itself is grueling, horrific, beyond imagining, but then you would, at the end of the day, you would do video diaries, you were taking photographs the whole time. Did you feel, because journalists are not allowed in, international journalists, talk about the responsibility that you've taken on to bear witness, to tell the world, in addition to doing all of the work. And many doctors have taken this on as well.
So I went in, when I first went in, I did not know what to expect, and I'd never done any media work, had never had an interview or anything like that. I was a physician. I gave lectures and whatnot. And so when I went the first time, when we came back, there was nobody who could speak as an eyewitness. Physicians and nurses were the only ones who could speak and advocate, because we're the only eyewitnesses. Journalists are still not being allowed in, and so we had to speak. So when I came back, in the first time when I came back in January of last year, only about 4 months after this genocide started, you know, I got a lot of media requests because nobody else was talking. So I had to train myself to speak. And I did, and thankfully so, you know, the ICJ at that point in time had come up in late January with their genocide, accusation or trial. And so I started talking about the genocide going on, and you know, it was just a matter of just learning on the fly, trying to get the word out to as many people as possible as an eyewitness. And every time I spoke, I just spoke simply of what I saw when I was there and what I witnessed.
Just on the genocide issue, obviously that requires evidence, and that's what the South African government submitted to the ICJ. Karim Khan, the ICC chief prosecutor, and his team and the judges there put out arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity based on evidence. What I find so fascinating is, as Naomi says, there are no international journalists in Gaza. Sometimes people say there are no journalists in Gaza, but of course we know Palestinian journalists, more than 200 have been killed, a record number, who have tried to document what's happening to their people. But given no international journalists have gone in, but international doctors have been able to go in, when you come back, or I mentioned my friend Irfan Galari came back and he wrote a piece for the LA Times about how many kids he saw with sniper bullets to the head. And Dr. Mark Perlmutter, who, you know, the Jewish doctor in the United States, who's talked about, I've never seen such perfection. You know, the bullet was exactly where the heart is. This was not crossfire. This was not collateral damage. I wonder what you saw, what you saw that led you to believe this is a genocide and war crimes, and you mentioned some of that. But B, everyone believes doctors on everything else. But when it came to Gaza, American, British, Canadian, Australian doctors went to Gaza, and they came back and lots of people still didn't believe them.
And you know, it's a good point, because when I came back the first time, my own colleagues, many of them, I would call them pro-genocide, you can label them as whatever you want, but many of my colleagues did not believe us, right? And they did not accept the fact that all these atrocities are going on in plain sight. Not only were the Palestinian journalists documenting this live, but we were corroborating all these accounts, not just myself. Many other physicians went after me and also corroborated. And so that was a challenge. If your own colleagues, you know, as physicians were...
They say stuff to your face?
Yeah, I mean, so one story, so when I first went to Gaza, and I do this on a lot of my international trips, I come back and I operate the next day. This is just what I do on my humanitarian trips. And I came back from Gaza the first time, and still in shock, and still, you know, processing what I had seen and what I had witnessed and what I had done. And also the whole feelings of survivor's guilt. You know, I'm the one that got to leave behind, because I bonded so well with the nurses and the doctors there anyway. So I came to the operating room, and the anesthesiologist, so the nurses saw me. At that point in time, I'd been on TV, because there's some local journalists that filmed me, and they sold the story to Reuters, and then all of a sudden, everybody knew that, you know, that I've been to Gaza when I told nobody beforehand. So when I arrived, all the nurses said, oh, Dr. Khan, you're a hero. And my fellow anesthesiologist who was there, who's pro-genocide, I guess you can call them that now, said, well, I don't know if I'd call Yasser a hero. He's done nothing to be a hero. And then as the day went on, he went on to lecture me in front of the nurses and my own students of how I don't understand why the Jordanians and the Egyptians and the Saudis and the Lebanese take these Palestinians because they're their people. Right? And so he said this out loud, and I had just come back from Gaza. So I heard this a lot. And after that was the direct confrontation. After that, you know, I had to face a lot of issues. Apparently I became public enemy number one, from what people told me. And so, yes, at a hospital level, at a university level, they did, you know, collate to come after me, accusing me of various things, which they never proved, because I fought back. I did, because I knew that I was in the right. There's nothing that I had said that's not out there already and established by people who know more than me and organizations. And I think that those early battles in February and March set the precedents, because I survived them. And I think it emboldened a lot of my colleagues to go ahead and speak, because there's a precedent set, right? Because they can't attack me, come after me for something which I'm still simply stating the truth. That's all I was doing.
So we had a question just before you came out about just how active many doctors have been in Canada and in other countries, attacking the protesters, smearing them. You know, I know there have been campaigns to keep lists for, you know, to prevent certain residents from getting jobs because they've signed letters, all that kind of doxing. And I think it's one thing when you hear lawyers are doing it, because you're like, lawyers, you know. But there is something, I mean, maybe I'm naive, but these are people who are devoting their lives, who have taken oaths to protect life. And when their colleagues, when hospitals are being bombed, when you know that babies are being, you know, I mean, those early images of kids and babies in a neonatal ICU, like from then on, I've never understood why it isn't a scandal for a doctor to make any kind of excuse for this, let alone go on the offensive against doctors who do the work, who are living up to that oath. Do you have any way of making sense of it?
No, because I mean, I openly talked about, for example, I openly talked about a 45-year-old woman that lost both her arms, her legs, her house, her husband, her 3 kids, and both her eyes. And then I went to operate on her, and she died before I could, which was a mercy for her, before I could operate on her eyes that also were shattered with shrapnel. And so the stories all came out. I mean, I don't see, and that's why I have been very disappointed in many of my colleagues. And how can you deny what's obvious? And how, you know, before all of this, we trusted each other, and we operate as physicians and surgeons in an atmosphere of trust, right? We trusted each other. Many of us were friends and to socialize even outside, and all that ends. And how does that even end? I mean, you know, and why does it even have to end? I mean, we're simply, I think most of my colleagues that came back, actually all of us who came back from Gaza, have all been transformed forever. And I can allude to that later, but basically, all we simply have always said is just what we witnessed. That's all we've said, basically, right? Those of us who've come back, and I don't know how you can deny this. It's like gross delusion is what I think. Yeah.
I want to ask you about the people who survive but with terrible injuries, and what I know that you think about patients who you treated, who I heard you talk about, I think a very small boy, maybe 2 years old, who you promised you would come back and give him a prosthetic eye. One of the things we've talked about tonight is the duties we have as Canadians to open our borders to people in need. I mean, are there demands that this group of political, organized people should be making on the Carney government? What's most pressing in your mind when you think of those, the people that you treated who have survived?
Well, one thing I want to emphasize, that any kind of disability in Gaza is a death sentence. I had a 14-year-old girl that had bilateral globe ruptures, shrapnel to her eyeballs, and they're shattered, and she's blind with no family, because most of them are orphans. And that's a death sentence, because with no infrastructure, with constant bombardment, with famine, no electricity, fuel, water, and no family, how are you going to survive? So it's a death sentence. Many of the patients that I treated when I was there, I took 23 eyes out in the almost 3 weeks that I was there combined between the two trips. I don't even know if those patients are alive. I don't know. So, I mean, the burden of basically, I mean, we have to advocate to let humanitarian aid in, and a ceasefire. So the bombing stops, and you let humanitarian aid in. That's a very simple ask, and why is it so hard to do?
We're running out of time. We're going to go back to the audience for a little bit. So if you've got questions, please do make your way to the microphone for Dr. Yasser or for Naomi if you didn't get them before. Just while they come up to the microphone, I'll just ask you this. I know you center Palestinians a lot when you talk about what happened in Gaza. You mentioned the brave Palestinian doctors. What surprised you, dare I say, in a positive way? What did you come back with, filled with hope about some of the people you met there, very resilient people?
Well, I think that, to quote one of my good friends, Dorothea, who's actually the director of a foundation called GLIA, with whom I went my second time. And she called this the Gaza phenomena, where, and what I mean by that is that, all of us healthcare workers that went, we came back transformed, and all of us described almost like a religious experience, even though you may not be of faith or whatever. It's just like an experience, and Gaza changes. And the reason it changes is that the people of Gaza have influences. They're not normal people. They are people of tremendous dignity that we've never seen before. All of us who went agree with this. They're people of, in a society that like in the West, that runs on capitalism, on productivity, on profits, on acquisition of things. That's not how the Gazans work. They work much on connection, right? They don't care about accumulating wealth or this, that. It's connection. And so what really affected me was their dignity. There's such dignified people where connection is everything to them, the relationships and connections. And that's why all of us, if you ask every single health worker who's gone to Gaza and come back, we all want to go back. We're all desperately trying to go back, because once you experience that, the illusion of the world is lifted. right? Everything becomes clear. And that's what Gaza has done for all of you and has done for us especially.
Wow. So well said. It's amazing that Yasser began with, I had never spoken to media before I went to Gaza. You're one of the most eloquent people I've come across in a long time. And by the way, what you say about the dignity makes it even worse to see those images right now, this week, of Palestinians being in Gaza being treated like animal, having food thrown at them by American and Israeli soldiers. Let's go to this lady here, and a message to all of you and to the three of us to keep questions short, answers short. We get through as many as we can because we're nearly at the end of our night. So go.
Mr. Hassan, I'm just curious, given the rising fascism in the U.S., when do you know when it's time to get the hell out?
That's a great question. It's a question I ask myself pretty much every day. I've had multiple conversations about this subject. It's very depressing that since January 20th, I've had to talk to a lot of lawyers about a lot of things. A lot of journalists are having to talk to lawyers all the time right now. It is a scary time.
Take back what I said about lawyers. They're awesome.
Yeah. We love lawyers right now. We love lawyers and judges. Look, on the one hand, I got to worry about safety, and friends of mine in the UK, like you're British, come back to the UK. But on the other hand, I said it earlier, I refuse to cede the ground and say you won and I lost. So no, I'm staying put. There are more of us than there are of them. There are more of us than there are of them. There are more of us than there are of them.
Really quick, I know that to make a difference, I can make donations to organizations, I can show up at protests, but sometimes that doesn't feel enough for me. And you guys are doing so much in your own ways. How do I, as an individual, show up more in solidarity or actually contribute to helping out in this situation? That's something I struggle with a lot on a daily basis.
I'm gonna put this to you, Yasser, as someone who's not a journalist or an activist. What do you think people who are fellow civil society members?
I think that whatever you're doing now, donating, posting, talking about it, coming here, and going to protests, just simply communicating about people of Gaza, keeping in your mind, not forgetting what's going on there. That's all we can do. Advocating to our politicians, voting with politicians who are against genocide and for human rights and humanitarian law. I think if we do that, liberation is going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of what are we going to do till that happens. It's inevitable. I've no doubt in my mind. It's just that we have to keep on doing exactly what we're doing because that's all we can do. And prayer, of course. I never forget prayer.
Lady here.
Kind of a similar question. How can we get through to people? Like, it feels like truth is really breaking down. We can't believe what our politicians say. People can't believe what they see coming from journalists in Palestine. People can't believe what they hear from their children, their friends, their neighbors about real things that are happening. How can we actually break down these barriers? It feels like we can't get through from MAGA to Zionism to climate. Like, how do we actually break those walls?
I mean, it's a huge crisis that we're in, that our information ecology is poisoned, right? And AI isn't helping because now no one knows, like you can say, well, that wasn't even real, what you see in front of you. And things weren't going that well before the information zone was flooded with deep fakes and so on. I think, honestly, that it sounds really corny, but really investing in your community and your relationships is what is going to get, like, people won't believe a stranger that posts online, but they might believe an old friend from high school. They might believe a colleague who they trust for other reasons, right? And so part of the reason why this misinformation is spreading as quickly as it is because we live in a really atomized time and we are more splintered, kind of the opposite of that description we just heard of Gaza and those investments in relationships. So.
And I would be a really lousy CEO if I didn't support independent journalism, right? If you don't like for years, all I've heard is, politically I'm on the left, religiously I'm a Muslim. All I've heard from lefties and Muslims my entire life is, oh, the media sucks, the media's so bad, the media's so bad. Well, some of us are trying to do something about it, and we would appreciate your support. Gentlemen here.
I'd like to narrow the scope of the previous question a little bit, and Naomi in particular, do you have any advice for young Jews trying to bridge that generational divide of maybe with older family members who are not necessarily Zionists, but are maybe more just vaguely, generally pro-Israel?
Send them pictures of Stephen Lewis holding up a sign and don't say no to genocide. For real, like I do think that is why it's important for older people to raise their voices and not just be like, the kids have it. You know, whether it's climate or genocide, we need intergenerational movements, and we should keep trying to reach people. You know, I think films like Israelism are also helpful.
Israelism's great. Also read my good friend Peter Beinart's new book, Being Jewish in the Aftermath of Gaza, which is a very powerful book from someone who knows Judaism inside out. Lady here. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. So I think all of the questions are kind of now about what we can practically do, and I want to ask the same thing. So basically, a lot of us, we've been boycotting, we've been, using social media to talk about Gaza, we've been talking to our friends, we're doing everything we can, going to protest, but it has stopped feeling like enough. And now there's this urge, and I believe I speak for a lot of people when I say this, there's this urge to actually physically do something on ground in addition to protesting. So do you have any advice regarding that, whether it's volunteer work or anything at all? One more thing, Mehdi, you're one of the reasons I became a journalist, so I just wanted to...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The microphone, I don't know for you guys, hearing, I don't know how, for me, it's hard to hear some of the questions. So I heard what you said at the end, thank you very much. Earlier though, I heard you say, we've been clubbing and it hasn't worked. So I was like, how would clubbing help stop the genocide? But I think you said protesting, but I'm just telling you what I heard. My short answer to that is do not give in to despair, right? They want, the other side is very nihilistic, right? They want to tear everything down. I'm not just talking about pro-Israel, I'm talking about the right in general, the reaction. And there's a line I heard about Trump. Trump doesn't want you to believe him over the Democrats or over the left. He wants you to believe no one. Because in an age where you believe nothing and no one, that is an age in which the strong man rises, the fascist rises, the misinformation proliferates. So don't give in to that despair. And I give the humorous example of Piers Morgan only because I spent a year and a half arguing with this man, and then I went on his show, and he goes, "I give up. I agree with you." And it's like, I get it. He's jumping on a bandwagon. I get it, but I'm glad. Like if part of him does recognize that this is wrong, and he seems to be upset about the children dying in Gaza, then I'll take it, and I'll take that across the spectrum. So my biggest point to you, and there's lots of practical things you can do. We can sit here all night, but don't give in to that despair that it's inevitable. We've lost. We're losing. That's not true.
Yeah.
Gentlemen here.
Perfect. This may be a grim question, but it goes to the board. What do you see as an end state for Gaza in the context that in recent history, tragedies have led to exaggerated responses from countries, and that those countries have doubled down when the narrative is going against them? Is Gaza's fated for the same, or is Gaza situation headed for the same fate? And will there be accountability?
One of you want to take that?
Well, I mean, just if I may,
Please.
Just from being on the ground, the majority of them are not going to leave. They would rather starve and die, but they're not going to leave. So then what are you going to do? Are you going to force them, lift them up, and put them, but they're not going to leave, number one. Number two, the end I know is liberation. I have no doubt about that. As to when that's going to happen is the only issue.
By the way, Donald Trump makes it sound like a real estate thing where it's like, well, we've got to clear the rubble. So people have to move while we clear the rubble. And I'm like, all right, move them into Israel while you're waiting. That's the obvious place. Many of them are from there. They're all refugees. But they don't want to do that, weirdly. Gentleman here.
My question was almost taken. I'm Aubrey Harris, subscriber to Zeteo. I'm a big fan. Seeing as that question's been there, I'd just like to ask, it feels like we're in a perpetual state of shock. And I'd just like to know how to get unshocked and how to strengthen our institutions so we're less shocked in the future.
A Zeteo subscriber who name-checked the show, my favorite person in the room. Naomi, how do we get unshocked?
Honestly, this is how we get unshocked. We get together, we
not
get
online,
oriented.
we can do real-world events.
Yeah, but we also read history. We're in a state of shock. There's a doctor here, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not just something bad happening. It's something bad happening that you don't understand. You kind of go into this sort of arrested state. We're creatures of story. We need to understand where we are, and that is what storytelling is. That's what we do when we say, okay, well, these are the lines that brought us here. So we make meaning together. It really does matter. When we aren't in that state, we're very, very vulnerable to people who come along and say this is the new story. I got interested in it after September 11th because that's what all of these authoritarian leaders were doing. We're saying nothing you knew before mattered. That's pre-9/11 thinking. You're a blank sheet, and now we're going to invade Iraq, who had nothing to do with this, right? We're in a war of civilization, a clash of civilizations. They hate your freedom. These like really cartoon stories. So we cannot leave it to others to make meaning for us, because that is extremely dangerous.
Well said. And by the way, one other thing I would just throw in there is, the word woke has now become the most kind of evil word for the right, but actually, yeah, stay woke, stay awake, don't fall asleep, don't go into a state of slumber. That's what they want. They want you distracted, shopping, consuming, and not actually speaking out in anger every day. People say, oh, you're so angry. Yeah, you should be angry. There's a lot to be angry about. Lady here.
Yeah, hi, hello. Sabah here. I'm also a journalist.
Closer to the microphone, sorry.
Yes. Sabah Ahmed. I'm also a journalist, and I happened to cover the war for 1 year since it started. But after a year, I gave up because the images coming out of Gaza, they were so horrifying. A mother as well. And when I sleep at night, I can't but think about the children who are being shattered, and as the doctor described, in a very bad and poor state. So my question here is, while we have these discussions and protests on streets, and when we are divesting and urging to sanction Israel, what are the steps forward? Because the more we want to move forward, they're closing on us. They are killing more and more people in Gaza. So in the practical sense, the more we speak, more Gazans are being killed, more Palestinians are facing the wrath.
All right, I'm going to take that question. I'm also going to take this gentleman here.
Hi there, my name is Murtaza Bukhari, and I'm a subscriber to Zeteo. My sort of question is in a general...
That's how everyone should start their question.
Right? So my question is that we see a lot of IOF soldiers that are from different countries, and they come in to Israel just to serve with the military. Why isn't there a lot more actions? I know Hind Foundation goes after and makes a case for the individuals, but why do I find that a lot of the IOS from Canada, from Britain, from different coming into Israel for fighting for a country that they've never been to, and they're fighting for something that's absolutely wrong? I don't understand their mindset.
The question is, why are they doing it?
Why are people?
What makes them go into into Palestinian territories to destroy lives? It becomes some of those things that I've seen on TikTok and different YouTube, and they're screening it, admitting that they're from London, admitting they're from Toronto, and then coming into Gaza, doing all that. Why is that?
The foreign soldiers.
Yeah.
Do you want to deal with that first, and we'll just do practical steps?
Yeah, I mean, this is why I was saying that we need to get at the ideology, the underlying supremacist ideology, because we can't understand it. Because the thing about supremacist ideologies is they inherently dehumanize the other and equate the safety of the in-group with the annihilation of the other. This is the story of fascism. This is, it replicates throughout history. So that's what they're doing. That's what we're seeing on those videos. And I think it's unique, not that this has never happened before, but it's unique that we are in the age of social media. So people are showing us their performances for their home audiences, right? That this is actually what they want. And so, in earlier fascist iterations, it took the form of the mass rally, right? And the celebration. But there's always a passion to it and a sadistic kind of joy to it. Fascism is, it's not just mechanistic, right? It is offering something very powerful to that in-group. And we, in the age of TikTok, are seeing that.
Do you want to deal with the lady's question? We're almost out of time, about she's struggling to sleep at night, practical steps.
Yeah.
Hope. And know that people in Gaza are still hopeful. Yes, they've gone through a lot, and many have lost a lot, but they're still hopeful. If you talk to them, I've been talking to them on a regular basis, the friends I have in Gaza still, and they asked me how I'm doing. I broke my leg, and they're asking me how I'm doing. They're suffering in a genocide, but they're hopeful. And that's what gives me hope, and that's why I know that liberation will come, because of the people. It's not because of anything else. It's because of who they are.
It's a very powerful point. And forgive me for completely undermining it by saying, do you want to tell the crowd how you broke your leg? You know you want to.
Where's my daughter Anna? I wish I could make up some fancy story like I was skateboarding. I was trampolining.
Okay.
My daughter.
All right, we're out of time. I was going to end it, but there's no way I can end it without the lights are bright. But I feel like Naomi Klein's husband has the last question of the night. Avi Lewis is there. So apology. That's going to be the last question. No pressure.
It's actually not a question. It's a news update, and it's not a happy one. Okay. But the Israeli airstrikes on Tehran have begun.
What?
You said the Israeli airstrikes?
The Israeli airstrikes on Iran have begun, and I think we need to let Mehdi go so he can go get on the air and tell everyone what's going on.
Oh wow! Okay.
If you have any quick
news, actually, because that would be the U-turn.
Okay.
This whole shit to finish.
That's it.
I'm not sure that is good news, but well, there you go. One time I had to look at my phone. I'm always on my phone. It's bad, right? This is what we talked about earlier in the conversation, which is the Israelis have no restraints, complete impunity. Trump has given this his blessing. It'd be interesting to see what Mr. Carney and other world leaders say about this stuff, because Trump ain't going to stop this stuff. So it is up to the rest of the world and the rest of us. I don't want to end on that note.
No, we need a peace movement now.
We do need a peace movement, 100%. Anti-war movement.
It's escalating. We need to escalate too.
I mean,
one thing I just want to say in response to the earlier question, and this feeling we've heard from several people tonight, and I think we all hear it as, we've tried this, it didn't work. It's always a little mysterious what the moment is where things tip, right? I mean, I have been, as was pointed out earlier, doing activism for many decades and organizing. And I can say that even to the people, the organizers, it's mysterious. You're doing the same thing, and just a few people are showing up, and then all of a sudden, it's everyone. All of a sudden, and nothing, it's not really clear, like Occupy Wall Street. Why then? Like, the financial crash had happened 3 years earlier. Why was it suddenly the moment where people were ready to take on the 1%? All we can do is be ready for that moment, right? And I actually do believe there is a tipping point. Like, there is something that's about to change. And I believe that the Israeli government is banking on our exhaustion. I believe Trump is banking on our exhaustion. And so we really have a moral responsibility to find another wind. I know it's not a second wind, it's a fourth wind, a fifth wind, but one of the things that we do when we get out of just the collectivism of it, right? Or just, yes, we do need to boycott, but we also need to come together in spaces where we really give one another energy, right? And that's what organizing does. Protests are great, but if we're not really connecting with people, we're not going to come away from it feeling really hopeful. It's those real, genuine relationships where we really start to feel like this is who we're fighting for each other, right? We're fighting from a place of love as well as rage, as well as just the desire to win, as Mehdi reminds us, but also our love for one another, for this planet, for Palestine. So we cannot give them our exhaustion, and we can give each other that energy, like we get it from each other. I think there is something shifting. I really do. It has taken way too long, but I believe it's shifting. South Africa was mentioned before. That famous Nelson Mandela quote, I know it's hackneyed, but it always seems impossible until it's done. And I believe that is true. So we've got to give each other energy.
And so on that note, I'm sorry to the folks standing. We ran out of time there. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It means so much to us as Zeteo that you're there supporting us.
Thank you, Mehdi. Thank you for coming to Canada.
Thank you for having me, Canada. I hope to come back. Thank you so much. Thank you to Naomi Klein. Thank you to Yasser Khan. Thank you very much. We love you. Appreciate it. Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.